In the cold morning light of January 1513, Niccolò Machiavelli sat in his modest farmhouse outside Florence, his fingers stained with ink as he penned what would become the most controversial guide to power ever written. Stripped of his position, exiled from the city he had served, he possessed nothing but his intellect and his observations of human nature. Yet within months, he had crafted a blueprint that would reshape how ambitious individuals approached wealth and influence for centuries to come. The man who emerged from that period of forced reflection understood something that escapes most people entirely: wealth is not earned through labor, it is seized through strategy. While millions wake each day to trade their hours for dollars, a select few recognize that true prosperity flows not from the sweat of one's brow, but from the careful orchestration of power, influence, and calculated opportunism. This revelation forms the cornerstone of what we might call the prince life, an existence where traditional notions of honest work give way to the more sophisticated understanding that wealth gravitates toward those who understand its true nature. Money, Machiavelli observed through his study of successful rulers, is merely a byproduct of power effectively wielded. The worker toils for coins, the prince creates systems that generate fortunes. Consider the fundamental difference in mindset. The worker asks, "How many hours must I work to afford this?" The prince asks, "How can I position myself so that others' work generates wealth for me?" This distinction separates those who spend their lives enriching others from those who build empires. It separates the governed from the governing, the employee from the entrepreneur, the follower from the leader. Machiavelli's genius lay not in inventing these principles, but in observing them with ruthless clarity among the successful leaders of his time. He watched as the Medici family transformed from simple bankers into the most powerful force in Renaissance Europe, not through harder work than their competitors, but through superior understanding of influence, leverage, and strategic positioning. He observed how Cesare Borgia conquered territories not through brute force alone, but through calculated alliances, well-timed betrayals, and the masterful manipulation of perception. These observations crystallized into insights that remain as relevant today as they were 500 years ago. The fundamental dynamics of power and wealth have not changed, only their expression has evolved. Where once a prince might secure loyalty through land grants and titles, today's equivalent involves equity stakes and partnership opportunities. Where Renaissance leaders built influence through strategic marriages and diplomatic alliances, modern princes construct networks through business partnerships and strategic collaborations. The worker life represents everything Machiavelli would have recognized as subordinate existence, trading time for money, seeking security through servitude, hoping that loyalty and hard work would eventually be rewarded by benevolent superiors. This mindset creates what he might have called the perfect subject: predictable, manageable, content with small rewards in exchange for large sacrifices. But those who study Machiavelli's true teachings understand that he was not writing for subjects. He was writing for those destined to become princes, individuals who recognize that the world belongs not to the most deserving, but to the most strategically capable. His work reveals pathways that allow ordinary individuals to transcend their circumstances through superior understanding of human nature, strategic thinking, and calculated risk-taking. The transition from worker to prince requires abandoning comfortable illusions about how wealth actually works. Most people cling to fairy tales about meritocracy and fair compensation, believing that consistent effort and moral behavior will inevitably lead to prosperity. Machiavelli's observations of actual successful leaders revealed a different reality entirely. Wealth flows toward those who understand leverage, who can inspire others to work toward their vision, who can identify and exploit opportunities that others miss or fear to pursue. This understanding explains why traditional career advice so often fails to create genuine wealth. Following conventional wisdom, get a good education, find a stable job, work hard, save money, produces comfortable mediocrity at best. It creates sophisticated servants, not princes. The strategies that generate real wealth operate according to different principles entirely, principles that Machiavelli documented with uncomfortable precision. The prince mindset recognizes that every interaction contains potential for strategic advancement, that every relationship represents possible leverage, that every challenge conceals opportunity for those clever enough to recognize it. This perspective transforms how one approaches everything from daily conversations to major business decisions. Instead of thinking like an employee hoping to impress a boss, one thinks like a potential partner evaluating mutual benefit. Instead of seeking permission, one seeks forgiveness after achieving results. Understanding this shift requires examining the psychological foundations that keep most people trapped in worker mentality. Fear plays the largest role: fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of responsibility. The worker life offers the illusion of security through dependence on others' decisions. Someone else determines salary, someone else sets priorities, someone else bears ultimate responsibility for outcomes. This arrangement appeals to those who prefer certainty over opportunity, safety over growth, supervision over autonomy. The prince life demands embracing uncertainty as the price of independence. It requires accepting responsibility not just for one's own outcomes, but for the outcomes of others who choose to follow one's lead. This responsibility intimidates many people, but, for those willing to accept it, it becomes the foundation of wealth generation. Every person willing to take responsibility for results beyond their own creates value that can be monetized. Machiavelli understood that successful leaders, whether political or commercial, share certain characteristics that enable them to accumulate power and wealth more effectively than their peers. These traits can be developed by anyone willing to study and practice them, regardless of their starting position. The path from worker to prince is not restricted by birthright or luck; it is available to anyone willing to master the necessary skills and mindset. The first fundamental principle of the Prince life centers on understanding that perception often matters more than reality, and that those who master the art of perception management can achieve outcomes that seem disproportionate to their actual resources or capabilities. Machiavelli observed this repeatedly among successful leaders of his era, noting how relatively minor princes could wield influence far beyond what their military or economic power would suggest possible. This insight directly challenges the worker mentality that focuses exclusively on tangible skills and measurable outputs. Workers believe that competence automatically leads to recognition and reward. They invest enormous energy in becoming excellent at specific tasks, assuming that their skill will speak for itself. This approach fails consistently because it ignores the human element that determines who gets promoted, who gets funded, who gets opportunities. The prince understands that humans make decisions based on emotions and impressions, then use logic to justify those choices afterward. This knowledge creates opportunities for those willing to study and influence the decision-making process. Instead of merely performing excellently, the prince performs excellently while ensuring that the right people notice and understand the significance of that performance. Consider how this principle applies in professional environments. The worker arrives early, stays late, produces high-quality work, and assumes these efforts will be recognized and rewarded. Often they are not, because the worker has failed to manage the perception of their contributions. The prince not only produces excellent work but ensures that stakeholders understand exactly how that work contributed to outcomes they care about. The prince documents results, shares credit strategically, and connects their contributions to larger organizational goals. This distinction becomes even more pronounced in entrepreneurial contexts. The worker-turned-entrepreneur focuses primarily on creating an excellent product or service, believing that quality will drive success. Many brilliant inventors and craftspeople fail commercially because they never learned to communicate value effectively. The prince entrepreneur understands that the perception of value often matters more than value itself, and invests accordingly in marketing, positioning, and relationship building. Machiavelli's observations about successful princes revealed that they consistently prioritized appearing strong, decisive, and competent over actually being the strongest, most decisive, or most competent person in every situation. They understood that leadership is largely a performance, and that people follow those who project confidence and clarity rather than those who demonstrate technical superiority. This insight disturbs many people because it seems to suggest that style matters more than substance. But Machiavelli was not advocating for empty showmanship. He was observing that substance without effective presentation often fails to achieve its intended impact, while well-presented substance creates influence far beyond what the substance alone would generate. The most effective princes combine genuine competence with masterful presentation. The practical application of this principle requires developing what might be called strategic visibility. This means ensuring that one's contributions are seen and understood by people who matter, that one's capabilities are demonstrated in contexts where they can be appreciated, and that one's potential is communicated effectively to those in position to provide opportunities. Strategic visibility differs significantly from simple self-promotion. Self-promotion focuses on drawing attention to oneself. strategic visibility focuses on drawing attention to value created. The difference is subtle but crucial. People resist obvious self-promotion, but they appreciate and reward those who help them understand and recognize value. The Prince develops multiple channels for creating strategic visibility. They volunteer for high-profile projects where success will be noticed. They solve problems that matter to people with influence. They position themselves as experts in areas where expertise is valued. They build relationships with people who can amplify their reputation. They speak and write about topics where they have valuable insights. Most importantly, they understand timing. The same action taken at different moments can produce dramatically different results. The Prince studies the landscape constantly, looking for moments when their particular skills or insights will be especially valued. They prepare for opportunities before those opportunities become obvious to others. This preparation often involves developing capabilities that others neglect because they seem tangential to immediate responsibilities. The worker focuses narrowly on their specific job requirements. The Prince develops broad competencies that will be valuable in multiple contexts. They learn about finance even if they are not accountants, study marketing even if they are engineers, understand management even if they are individual contributors. The Prince also invests heavily in relationships, understanding that opportunities often flow through personal networks rather than formal channels. They build relationships not through manipulation, but through genuine value creation. They help others achieve their goals, connect people who can benefit from knowing each other, and maintain contact with people across different industries and levels of influence. This network building requires thinking beyond immediate reciprocity. The worker builds relationships primarily with people who can help them directly and immediately. The Prince builds relationships with people who might become influential, who know influential people, or who possess specialized knowledge that could become valuable in unpredictable circumstances. Machiavelli noted that successful princes often maintained relationships with people across different factions and interest groups, understanding that today's enemy might become tomorrow's ally as circumstances change. This flexibility in relationships requires separating personal feelings from strategic considerations, another characteristic that distinguishes princes from workers. The worker tends to form relationships based on personal compatibility and shared values. While these relationships can be deeply satisfying, they often lack strategic diversity. The Prince cultivates relationships across different perspectives and interests, understanding that diversity of viewpoints creates opportunities that homogeneous networks cannot provide. This approach extends to information gathering as well. The Prince systematically collects information from multiple sources, understanding that knowledge asymmetries create opportunities for those who possess superior information. They read broadly, attend conferences outside their immediate field, maintain relationships with people in different industries, and stay informed about trends that might affect their areas of interest. The worker typically focuses on information directly relevant to their current responsibilities. This narrow focus creates vulnerability to changing circumstances and limits ability to recognize opportunities that cross traditional boundaries. Many of today's most successful entrepreneurs built their fortunes by recognizing connections between apparently unrelated trends or technologies. Managing perception also requires understanding and adapting to different audiences. The same message delivered to different groups requires different presentation to be effective. The Prince studies their audiences carefully, understanding what each group values, what concerns them, what language resonates with them. They adapt their communication style without changing their fundamental message. This adaptation skill becomes especially important when dealing with superiors, peers, and subordinates simultaneously. Each relationship requires different approaches. Superiors typically want to understand how one's work contributes to their priorities. Peers need to see mutual benefit rather than competition. Subordinates require inspiration and clear direction. The Prince masters these different communication modes, switching fluidly between them as circumstances require. They can be deferential with superiors without being submissive, collaborative with peers without being taken advantage of, and authoritative with subordinates without being domineering. The second fundamental principle involves understanding that wealth creation requires building systems rather than selling time, and that sustainable prosperity comes from owning processes rather than participating in them as a replaceable component. This insight strikes at the heart of why most people remain trapped in worker mentality throughout their careers, even when they achieve high levels of skill or income within that paradigm. Machiavelli observed that successful princes distinguished themselves not through superior personal capability, but through their ability to create and control systems that generated power and wealth independent of their moment-to-moment involvement. A prince who relied entirely on personal effort could never compete with one who commanded the coordinated efforts of many people working toward shared objectives. This observation translates directly to modern wealth creation. The highest-paid workers, surgeons, lawyers, consultants still trade time for money, albeit at premium rates. Their income stops when they stop working. They may achieve comfortable lifestyles, but they rarely build generational wealth because their earning capacity depends entirely on their personal availability and energy. The Prince approach involves creating value through systems, businesses, investments, intellectual property, networks that generate returns without requiring constant personal input. This shift from selling time to building assets represents the crucial transition from worker to prince mentality. It requires thinking beyond immediate compensation toward long-term wealth accumulation. Understanding this principle begins with recognizing the difference between income and wealth. Income represents money received for activities performed. Wealth represents assets that generate income without requiring corresponding effort. The worker focuses on increasing income through better jobs, higher salaries, additional qualifications. The prince focuses on converting income into wealth through strategic asset acquisition and system building. This distinction explains why many high earners remain financially vulnerable despite impressive salaries. They achieve lifestyle inflation rather than wealth building, spending increased income on better consumption rather than investing in productive assets. When their ability to work diminishes through age, illness, or economic disruption, their lifestyle becomes unsustainable because it depends entirely on continued earning rather than accumulated wealth. The prince mentality involves consistently converting a portion of earned income into assets that can generate future income. This process requires delayed gratification and strategic thinking. Instead of upgrading lifestyle immediately when income increases, the prince calculates how much additional wealth could be created by investing that increment strategically. However, asset accumulation alone does not distinguish princes from sophisticated workers. Many people build investment portfolios or real estate holdings while maintaining employee mentality. True prince thinking involves creating systems that multiply individual effort through other people's contributions. This multiplication effect is what enables relatively ordinary individuals to build extraordinary wealth. The most straightforward application of this principle involves building businesses that can operate without the owner's constant involvement. This requires developing systems, hiring capable people, and creating processes that maintain quality and efficiency independent of the founder's daily participation. Many entrepreneurs fail to achieve this transition, remaining essentially self-employed rather than becoming true business owners. The difference lies in building scalable systems rather than practicing enhanced craftsmanship. The craftsman approach involves personally performing work at increasingly sophisticated levels. The systems approach involves creating frameworks that enable others to produce consistent results. The craftsman builds a practice, the prince builds an enterprise. This transition requires developing different skills than those needed for excellent individual performance. Systems building requires understanding process design, quality control, performance measurement, incentive alignment, and delegation. Many technically excellent people struggle with this transition because it demands shifting focus from perfection in execution to effectiveness in coordination. Machiavelli noted that successful princes learn to achieve results through others rather than trying to handle everything personally. They understood that personal limitations would eventually constrain growth, while well-designed systems could scale indefinitely. This insight applies equally to modern wealth building. The prince studies how to motivate people to perform excellently in pursuit of shared objectives. This requires understanding human nature, designing appropriate incentives, and creating environments where people can succeed while contributing to larger goals. Unlike the worker who competes with colleagues for limited advancement opportunities, the prince creates situations where everyone's success contributes to their own success. This abundance mindset represents another crucial distinction between worker and prince mentality. Workers operate from scarcity assumptions, limited positions, finite resources, zero-sum competition. Princes operate from abundance assumptions, unlimited opportunities for value creation, infinite potential for wealth generation, positive sum collaboration. The abundance mindset enables building systems that benefit all participants while generating exceptional returns for the system creator. The best businesses, investments, and partnerships create value for everyone involved while providing disproportionate benefits to those who design and control the systems. Understanding this principle requires studying successful wealth creation models across different industries and time periods. The patterns become clear once you recognize them. Ray Kroc built wealth not by making better hamburgers, but by creating systems that enabled others to deliver consistent results while generating royalties for the system owner. Sam Walton created wealth not through superior retailing skills, but by designing supply chain and management systems that enabled massive scale advantages. These examples illustrate how princes think differently about business opportunities. Instead of asking, "How can I do this better?" they ask, "How can I create systems that enable consistent excellence?" Instead of focusing on personal performance, they focus on systemic performance. Instead of competing through individual effort, they compete through organizational capability. This systems thinking extends beyond business creation to investment strategy as well. The worker approach to investing involves buying individual stocks or funds based on research and hoping for appreciation. The prince approach involves understanding investment systems, how markets work, what drives long-term value creation, how different asset classes behave under various economic conditions. The prince builds investment systems that generate returns through multiple mechanisms: appreciation, income, tax advantages, and leverage. They understand how to use other people's money to amplify returns while managing downside risk. They create investment structures that compound growth over time rather than seeking quick profits from market timing. Real estate provides an excellent example of prince thinking applied to investment. The worker approach involves buying a house as a residence and hoping it appreciates. The prince approach involves understanding how real estate can generate income through rent, appreciate through market forces and improvements, provide tax advantages through depreciation, and enable leverage through mortgaging. The prince might purchase rental properties, not to manage them personally, but to create income streams that fund additional investments. They might develop properties to capture development profits. They might syndicate deals to use other investors' money while retaining control and disproportionate returns. They think systematically about how real estate fits into broader wealth-building strategies. This systematic approach applies to every aspect of wealth building. The prince studies how successful people have built wealth across different eras and industries, looking for transferable principles rather than tactics that only work in specific circumstances. They understand that while specific opportunities change, the fundamental dynamics of wealth creation remain constant. Tax strategy provides another area where systems thinking creates advantages. The worker pays taxes on earned income and accepts whatever burden results. The prince understands how different types of income receive different tax treatment, how business ownership creates opportunities for legitimate tax optimization, how timing income and expenses can minimize tax liability. The prince builds wealth through strategies that optimize after-tax returns rather than simply maximizing gross income. They understand how depreciation, capital gains treatment, retirement account advantages, and business expense deductions can significantly impact long-term wealth accumulation. They work with professionals who can structure transactions to minimize tax drag while maintaining appropriate risk levels. Estate planning represents the ultimate expression of systems thinking for wealth building. The worker hopes to accumulate enough assets to support retirement and, perhaps, leave something for children. The prince builds wealth systems designed to compound across generations, using trusts, business structures, and charitable vehicles to minimize estate taxes while maintaining family control. These advanced strategies require long-term thinking and sophisticated professional guidance. But the underlying principle, building systems rather than relying on personal effort, can be applied at any wealth level. The key is consistently converting income into productive assets and building frameworks that enable those assets to generate additional wealth without requiring constant personal management. The emotional challenge of transitioning from worker to prince mentality involves accepting responsibility for results beyond one's immediate control. Workers can blame external circumstances when outcomes disappoint expectations. Princes must accept that system design determines results, and inadequate outcomes reflect inadequate systems rather than bad luck or unfair circumstances. This responsibility can feel overwhelming initially, but it ultimately becomes liberating. Once you understand that wealth comes from building effective systems rather than working harder within existing systems, the path forward becomes clear. Instead of hoping that external forces will recognize and reward your efforts, you focus on creating value systems that generate rewards independent of others' approval or cooperation. The prince develops what might be called systems intuition, the ability to recognize how different components interact to produce overall results. This skill enables identifying leverage points where small changes can produce large improvements, recognizing when systems need fundamental redesign rather than incremental adjustment, and understanding how to build feedback mechanisms that enable continuous improvement. Developing systems intuition requires studying successful systems across multiple domains. The prince studies how great companies organize themselves, how successful investors approach markets, how effective leaders build organizations, how innovative entrepreneurs create new industries. They look for patterns that transcend specific contexts and can be adapted to their particular circumstances and objectives. This study extends beyond business and finance to include understanding how social systems, political systems, and economic systems function. The prince recognizes that personal wealth building occurs within larger systems, and understanding those larger systems creates opportunities that pure focus on individual tactics cannot provide. The transition from worker to prince requires patience and persistence. Systems take time to build and longer to generate significant results. Many people abandon the approach before achieving breakthrough results because they underestimate the time required or overestimate their ability to accelerate the process through harder work. But those who persist and learn to think systematically about wealth creation eventually achieve financial independence and the ability to pursue opportunities based on interest and potential rather than immediate income needs. This freedom represents the ultimate objective of the prince life, not just accumulating wealth, but achieving the independence that wealth properly managed can provide. The third fundamental principle reveals how princes consolidate and compound their advantages through strategic relationship building and influence cultivation, understanding that sustainable wealth and power flow through networks of mutual benefit rather than individual achievement. Machiavelli observed that the most successful leaders distinguish themselves not through superior personal capabilities alone, but through their ability to inspire others to work toward shared visions while ensuring their own positions remain central and indispensable. This principle addresses the greatest limitation of both worker and early-stage prince thinking, the assumption that individual effort, even when systematized and leveraged, can compete with coordinated collective action. The worker believes hard work will be rewarded. The beginning prince believes superior systems will generate wealth. But the mature prince understands that lasting success requires becoming the focal point of networks that create value for all participants while generating exceptional returns for the network orchestrator. The evolution from individual contributor to systems builder to network orchestrator represents the complete transition from worker to prince mentality. Each stage builds upon the previous one, but the final stage requires capabilities that many technically successful people never develop because they focus on optimization rather than expansion, efficiency rather than influence, transactions rather than relationships. Understanding network orchestration begins with recognizing that all significant wealth creation involves coordinating multiple people's efforts toward common objectives. Even apparently individual achievements depend on extensive networks of suppliers, customers, employees, advisors, and supporters. The difference between those who build substantial wealth and those who achieve modest success lies in how consciously and strategically they develop these networks. The worker approach to relationships focuses on immediate reciprocity and functional necessity. Workers build relationships with colleagues who can help them perform current responsibilities, supervisors who can provide advancement opportunities, and vendors who can supply needed services. These relationships serve specific purposes and often fade when circumstances change. The prince approach involves building relationships with strategic depth and breadth, understanding that today's connection might become tomorrow's crucial partnership in ways that cannot be predicted. The prince invests in relationships based on potential rather than immediate utility, maintaining connections across different industries, skill levels, and geographic locations. This network building requires genuine value creation rather than superficial networking. People can sense when others approach them purely for personal benefit versus when they offer mutual value. The prince develops the ability to help others achieve their objectives while positioning themselves as valuable connectors and resources. This approach naturally leads to reciprocal support when opportunities arise. Machiavelli noted that successful princes mastered the art of creating loyal supporters without creating dependencies that could become liabilities. They inspired loyalty through opportunity creation rather than personal obligation. This insight translates to modern network building through providing others with chances to grow, learn, profit, and advance rather than simply asking for favors or support. The prince studies what matters to each person in their network, their goals, challenges, interests, and aspirations. Armed with this understanding, they can provide introductions, opportunities, information, and assistance that genuinely benefit others. This value creation establishes the prince as a valuable network node, someone worth knowing and supporting. Building valuable networks requires patience and long-term thinking. Many relationships provide no immediate benefit and may not generate returns for years. But compound relationship building, like compound financial growth, can produce extraordinary results given sufficient time and consistency. The prince who maintains relationships through multiple economic cycles, career changes, and geographic relocations often finds themselves connected to opportunities that others cannot access. The strategic dimension of network building involves understanding how different relationships can be combined to create opportunities that would not exist otherwise. The prince develops what might be called a relationship synthesis, the ability to recognize how connecting different people or capabilities might generate value for all involved while positioning themselves as the catalyst or coordinator. This synthesis thinking enables identifying business opportunities, investment possibilities, and strategic partnerships that others miss because they think in terms of bilateral rather than multilateral relationships. Many successful deals involve bringing together three or more parties who each contribute different capabilities toward a shared objective that none could achieve independently. The prince becomes expert at structuring these multi-party arrangements so that everyone benefits while ensuring their own position remains central to the relationship's continuation. This centrality provides both financial returns and strategic positioning for future opportunities. Others in the network understand that the prince's continued involvement benefits everyone, creating alignment that sustains long-term collaboration. Influence cultivation represents the natural extension of strategic relationship building. While networks provide access to opportunities and resources, influence determines how effectively the prince can mobilize those resources toward specific objectives. Influence differs from authority in that it operates through persuasion and alignment rather than command and control. Machiavelli observed that sustainable influence comes from consistently providing value to others while maintaining independence and optionality. Leaders who become too dependent on any single relationship or group lose their ability to act decisively when circumstances require difficult choices. The prince builds influence broadly enough to maintain strategic flexibility. Developing influence requires understanding what motivates different people and how to align their interests with desired outcomes. This understanding goes beyond surface-level incentives to encompass deeper psychological drivers: recognition, autonomy, purpose, security, growth. The prince learns to frame opportunities and requests in terms that resonate with each person's particular motivational profile. The ability to influence outcomes without formal authority becomes especially valuable in complex modern environments where success requires coordinating independent actors who cannot be directly controlled. Whether building businesses, making investments, or pursuing opportunities, the prince frequently needs cooperation from people who have no obligation to provide it. This influence operates through multiple channels. Expertise influence comes from being recognized as knowledgeable about subjects others value. Relationship influence comes from being connected to people others want to reach. Resource influence comes from controlling access to opportunities, information, or capabilities others need. Vision influence comes from articulating futures that others find compelling and want to participate in creating. The prince systematically develops influence across all these dimensions while ensuring that no single source of influence becomes so dominant that losing it would undermine their overall position. This diversification provides resilience and flexibility while creating multiple pathways for achieving objectives. Information management represents a crucial component of influence cultivation. The prince understands that information asymmetries create opportunities for those who possess superior knowledge about market conditions, industry trends, regulatory changes, or organizational developments. They invest heavily in gathering information from multiple sources and maintaining early visibility into changes that might affect their areas of interest. This information gathering extends beyond formal research to include insights from network relationships, attendance at industry events, participation in professional organizations, and maintenance of relationships with people in diverse fields. The prince often knows about opportunities, challenges, and changes before they become common knowledge, enabling proactive positioning rather than reactive adjustment. The strategic sharing of information becomes a tool for building influence and strengthening relationships. The prince carefully considers what information to share with whom and when, understanding that providing valuable insights to the right people at the right times can generate significant reciprocal value. They become known as sources of valuable information, which naturally attracts others who want access to their insights. Trust building forms the foundation of all sustainable influence and relationship development. The prince understands that trust comes from consistent reliability rather than grand gestures. They do what they say they will do, when they say they will do it, even when circumstances make this inconvenient. They maintain confidentiality when requested, provide honest assessments even when difficult, and prioritize long-term relationship value over short-term gains. This reliability extends to communication style and approach. The prince develops reputation for straight talk, analytical rigor, and balanced perspective. Others come to value their input because they provide thoughtful analysis rather than reflexive agreement or disagreement. They become trusted advisors because they separate personal preferences from objective assessment. The cultivation of multiple mentor and advisor relationships provides accelerated learning while building influence networks. The prince systematically identifies and approaches successful people whose insights could accelerate their development. They prepare thoroughly for these interactions, ask thoughtful questions, follow up appropriately, and find ways to provide value in return. These relationships often evolve into mutual advisory arrangements where the prince provides insights and assistance to more experienced people while receiving guidance and introductions in return. This reciprocity creates sustainable relationships rather than one-sided mentoring that might feel exploitative. The prince also invests in developing others, understanding that people they help early in their careers often become valuable network nodes as they achieve success. This investment in others' development creates loyalty and reciprocal support while building reputation as someone who genuinely cares about others' growth and success. Strategic positioning within existing networks and organizations enables leveraging established relationships and infrastructure while building independent capabilities. The prince identifies organizations, associations, and groups that provide access to valuable relationships and learning opportunities. They participate actively enough to build relationships and reputation while maintaining independence and optionality. This participation often involves volunteering for leadership roles or high-visibility projects that showcase capabilities while creating opportunities to work closely with influential people. The prince treats these positions as relationship building and skill development opportunities rather than ends in themselves. The ultimate expression of network orchestration involves creating new organizations, partnerships, or initiatives that bring together diverse capabilities toward shared objectives while positioning the prince as the central coordinating figure. These ventures might be businesses, investment vehicles, professional associations, or charitable initiatives, but they share the common characteristic of generating value for multiple participants while establishing the prince as an essential network node. Building these orchestrating positions requires vision, persistence, and the ability to inspire others to commit time and resources toward long-term objectives. The prince must articulate compelling opportunities, design structures that benefit all participants, and maintain momentum through inevitable challenges and setbacks. The financial returns from successful network orchestration often exceed returns from individual business building or investing because they involve coordinating larger amounts of capital and capability than any individual could control directly. The prince captures value from the coordination and facilitation rather than just their personal contribution, enabling wealth creation at scales that individual effort cannot achieve. The transition to network orchestrator requires developing comfort with ambiguity and long-term thinking. Unlike individual projects with clear timelines and measurable outcomes, network building and influence cultivation involve investing effort with uncertain returns over indefinite periods. Many people abandon these approaches because they cannot tolerate the ambiguity or because they focus on measuring individual relationship returns rather than network effects. But those who persist and learn to think systematically about relationship building and influence cultivation eventually achieve positions where opportunities flow naturally through their networks rather than requiring constant searching and competition. They become magnets for deals, partnerships, and ventures because others recognize them as valuable collaborators who can contribute networks, insights, and coordination capabilities beyond their individual resources. This positioning represents the ultimate achievement of the prince life, not just personal wealth and success, but the ability to create opportunities and value for others while maintaining central positions in networks that generate continuous opportunities for further growth and impact. The prince transcends the limitations of individual effort to achieve results through coordinated collective action, just as Machiavelli observed among the most successful leaders of his era. The path from worker to prince requires abandoning comfortable assumptions about fairness, security, and individual effort in favor of strategic thinking, systems building, and network orchestration. This transition demands patience, persistence, and willingness to accept responsibility for results beyond one's direct control. But, for those willing to make this evolution, it provides pathways to wealth and influence that traditional approaches cannot match. Machiavelli's insights remain as relevant today as they were 5 centuries ago because they address fundamental aspects of human nature and social organization rather than temporary circumstances. Understanding these principles and learning to apply them systematically provides advantages that compound over time, eventually enabling the achievement of objectives that seemed impossible from within the worker mentality. The choice between worker life and prince life ultimately comes down to whether one prefers security through dependence or freedom through self-reliance, whether one seeks comfort through conformity or growth through challenge, whether one accepts circumstances as fixed or recognizes them as changeable through strategic action. For those ready to abandon worker assumptions and embrace prince responsibilities, Machiavelli's blueprint provides the foundation for transformation that can reshape not just individual outcomes, but the outcomes of everyone willing to follow principled leadership toward shared prosperity.